what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching another episode of Gamescript. And right now, we're going to take a look at the Dallas Cowboys versus New York Giants. They're playing in New York tonight, and we're going to take a look at this game and see if there's anything interesting in it, any different directions that we could go with it. It looks like the total in this one is 46.5. With Dallas favored by 3.5 points. So we'll see what's on this roster for tonight to see what we like and how we think we can approach this game a little bit differently. We want to try to face against 20% of the field as opposed to 80% of the field. So we're going to take a look at how we can get a little bit different with our lineups tonight. So we'll go into a screen share here. Going into the DraftKings lobby, and let's take a look at how these players are shaping up here. All right, so it's going to be an interesting game. There's a lot of expensive players at the top here. You got Tony Pollard, you got Saquon Barkley, you got CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones, Darren Waller. So there's a lot of fantasy assets in this, and we have an opportunity here to get a little different with who we put in the captain. I've checked out some of the ownerships. These sites are pretty wildly different with their ownership projections. I've seen some sites that have Daniel Jones way up high in ownership projections and CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard pretty low, versus other sites that have something that I consider more accurate in Pollard and CeeDee Lamb are higher owned and Daniel Jones is lower owned. But I think the talk of this game is mainly that the Giants haven't been able to beat us in forever. And Daniel Jones sucks against Dallas. He hasn't been able to figure it out. He always underperforms against Dallas. He has, QB 17 on the week against Dallas when he plays them. And just Daniel Jones can't figure out Dallas, which is completely understandable. That's probably the way that a lot of people are going to go with their lineup building. And I think in order to get different, we're just going to have to build a lineup where the Giants win this game. And we gotta try to figure out how we're going to approach that. Like what kind of game script would favor the Giants winning against Dallas tonight. And I think that in order for that to happen, or in order for the Giants to at least put up a fight, and we can build our lineups a little bit differently than the field, is we're going to need Daniel Jones to perform tonight. We're going to need him to do well in this game. And we're going to need Dak. I'm thinking fade Dak and go more run heavy on this. Mike McCarthy has said several times that he wants to be more run focused this year. In the past, when McCarthy was calling plays, he's been relatively pass heavy, but I can see this game being more of a run heavy approach. They've got a solid defense that they can rely on, and they can, try to keep Daboll's offense off the field as much as they can. If they think it's a threat, who knows what they're going to do to approach this game. We won't know until we see them start to play. But from all accounts, it seems like Dallas is going to be run heavy this year, and they've got the running back to do it. And Tony Pollard. Pollard's a stud. He was going in first, second round of best ball this season. Everybody was drafting him pretty early. Saquon Barkley, he's another guy that was going in the second round. CeeDee Lamb is a guy that's going in the first, second round. Darren Waller was going early for tight ends. He was going in like the 5th round. So we got a bunch of fantasy assets here that we can take a look at when building this lineup. The script that I want to write is going to be Daniel Jones kind of coming through and finally beating the Cowboys, or finally, performing well against the Cowboys. So I'm going to put him in captain. And when I have him in captain, Daniel Jones is a like a quarterback that can obviously run the ball and get some fantasy points that way. So with Daniel Jones, I still want to stack him with 2 receivers, because I think if we go more giant heavy in this build, we might be able to differentiate ourselves a little bit more with everybody kind of leaning Dallas in this game. And keep in mind, the spread is only 3.5 points. So there's not a whole lot of faith that Dallas is just going to come in here and own the Giants. So there is some doubt out there that the Dallas is going to be able to pull it off. And I think with the biggest difference between these two teams, apart from Dallas having more weapons in the offense, is the coaching. And Brian Daboll was able to take a scrap heap last year to the playoffs, which was impressive. They had an easy schedule, but so did everybody else in the division. Dallas, I believe Dallas ended up coming in 2nd place, but the Giants really outperformed last season, and a lot of that was on Brian Daboll's coaching. He turned Daniel Jones more efficient. Daniel Jones was playing better last year, and I think in year 2 he's going to improve Daniel Jones even more now that Jones has a little bit more confidence in him. He's got a new contract with the Giants. The Giants signed him to a new contract, so he has some things going for him to build his confidence a little bit. So I think Daniel Jones, under this guidance, can continue to improve. So let's put him in the captain. I want to have Tony Pollard in my lineups. CeeDee Lamb is going to be a tough guy to fade, but I think in order for us to do this build, we may have to tell a story where CeeDee Lamb is not one of the top scorers on the board. He could still score a decent amount of points, but at his salary at $10,400, he's going to need to, outscore Barkley and everybody else basically in order to be worth his salary. I think Barkley can potentially outscore CeeDee Lamb in this game. At least that's the angle that I'm taking on it. Barkley has done well against Dallas in the past. He did not do overly well against them last year. He had 1 up game and 1 down game against them in the 2 times that they faced off against each other. Let's see, what did he do against them last year? Just get these game logs up here. We can take a look at what Saquon Barkley did against Dallas last year. So they played each other twice, and the first game he did better than the second one. He had 81 yards, a touchdown. He had 4 receptions for 45 yards on top of that, with no receiving touchdown there. The second game that they played against each other, he went 11 attempts for 39 yards rushing. Nothing too impressive there, but 4 receptions for 13 yards. And I believe he scored a touchdown in that game too. So he scored a touchdown in both games. So obviously he has that touchdown upside. So we'll see how we can build this lineup with Barkley in there. I like stacking Barkley with Daniel Jones just because of his role in the passing game. So Barkley is going to be a part of this game, like no matter which direction it goes. If Dallas pulls out with a lead, then Barkley's still in it. If Dallas falls behind and the Giants are doing well, Barkley still has a role in it. I feel the same way about Pollard. Both those dudes are pretty heavily involved in the passing game as well as the run game. So we'll put both those guys in there. Let's say we're fading Lamb. We're fading Lamb. We're going to need somebody to kind of fill that void of Lamb, but we'll figure that out in a minute here. Daniel Jones, we need a second stacking partner for Jones. And there's two guys in particular I'm looking at because we're going to need the Giants to get aggressive in this game in order to kind of pull it off with the Daniel Jones captain, which means, we're going to want the Giants to, be launching some bombs in this game. Thinking Dallas, their defense is super aggressive in the secondary. They try to jump a lot of routes, and it works for them a lot of times, but it can also burn them. A couple years ago, they had a ton of interceptions, but they also were allowing a ton of passing yards. So for that, I like Darius Slayton, and I also like this rookie Jalen Hyatt. He was impressive in camp. This is the first game of the season, so we don't know what kind of usage he's going to get yet. So to be safe, we could go with Slayton here. So we have two stacking partners with Daniel Jones. We got Saquon Barkley, and we got Darius Slayton. I believe I was reading in ETR that Slayton was getting a 19% target share last season, even though Slayton was largely overlooked. He's been kind of a largely overlooked guy his entire career in New York, even though he's had some big moments and flashed some big moments. But Slayton's a guy that, people kind of tend to overlook. So he's an interesting guy to put in this lineup. If we look at ownership before this game starts and we see that Slayton is trending higher, because I've seen a couple people talking about him, then maybe it's a good idea to pivot to Jalen Hyatt or think of a different game plan here. But right now, I'm going to plug in Slayton for this one. Another guy that I like is Graham Gano. In these games against Dallas, Gano has basically scored at least 2 field goals in 5 of the past 6 games that he's played against Dallas. And that includes 2 games where he had 3 field goals and 4 field goals. So he scored a lot of points against Dallas, a lot of fantasy points against Dallas. And I think that he could do the same tonight. So I'm going to have Graham Gano as a staple in these lineups. I think Graham Gano last year, he had that one captain week where he ended up winning, shipping the contest as the captain, and that was against Dallas. So here he is again, back against Dallas with another opportunity to have a big game. And with the way that we want this game to play out, more of a lower scoring game, so that, like the Dallas weapons aren't as significant. We want to have Gano scoring some field goals, or we want to have at least the Dallas kicker scoring some field goals. So if you don't want to use Gano, swap him out for that Dallas kicker. Because for a game script like this to work, we're going to want to have a kicker in there in order to kind of mitigate some of these touchdowns being scored and stuff like that. If we're having to fade a guy like CeeDee Lamb, we want to fade touchdowns pretty much by receivers, and we're fading Dak. So obviously, we want to fade those receiving touchdowns on the Dallas part. That leaves us with 4,900 left. There's a few guys in here that would fit this kind of build. Ferguson, the tight end for Dallas. Dallas relies heavily on their tight ends. Dak is always leaning on his tight ends if you watch him play. So you can plug in Ferguson there as your final piece. Ferguson has looked pretty good. He looked pretty good last year. I believe it was his rookie year last year, but every time he seemed to be on the field, he was getting targeted by Dak. So Dak already had a pretty good rapport with him. Dalton Schultz was the starter, obviously, last year. And, Dak turned Schultz into a fantasy asset too. And on top of that, the Giants are allowing about 13 fantasy points per game to tight end last season. So they are susceptible to the tight end position. And that leaves us with, like a good filler with Ferguson there with the salary that we have left. If you wanted to go double kicker, I think that would make a lot of sense with this build. If you wanted to go Pollard and the kicker, that would make sense to, keep the passing game out of this lineup. If they're not converting on touchdowns with the passing game, you want them converting on the running game, and you want them kicking field goals. So that is an interesting way to go. You could go with the Giants defense. Giants defense works with this as well. Keeping Dak at bay, keeping him from throwing touchdowns. I don't know how much lower I would go on this, lower than that. I don't want to have more than 2 pass catchers with Daniel Jones. I don't think he has the ability to support 2 pass catchers in fantasy output. So if you took out Slayton and you wanted to put in Hyatt, for example, if you wanted to keep that potential deep ball in there, you could put in the Cowboys, who would also make sense in this build. And not many people are going to want to play the defense with the quarterback of the opposite team. Now, if you use the Cowboys, you could tell a story that, Daniel Jones has thrown a couple interceptions, maybe a pick 6 or 2, and, he's playing catch up. And as he's playing catch up, he's hitting Barkley and Hyatt for fantasy points, and keeping the Giants in the game, but keeping Dak in the passing game out of the game. So that makes a lot of sense to have the Cowboys in there with Hyatt as a substitute for Slayton. Another way you could go, we don't know what Darren Waller's status is for this game yet. I don't think he's been confirmed to be in just yet. He's questionable. I think it was leaning towards he's going to play, but we don't know that for sure yet, as he's still listed as questionable. Now, if Waller is playing, I think you can play around with this a little bit. Maybe take Barkley out and put Waller in instead of him, and then get. Let's see what that would look like. If we took Barkley out and we put Waller in, that would leave us with, if we were doing this build, let's say we wanted to put Slayton back in there, that would leave us with about 7,000 in salary. So it gives you options like Hodgins, but again, I don't want to use that additional receiver on the Giants. I might go to Gallup in that situation, because you can tell a story with Gallup and Pollard that, the Dak is hitting Gallup instead of CeeDee Lamb with those passes, but Dak isn't producing enough fantasy points to beat out Daniel Jones or Pollard, who are in that price range that Dak's in. So Waller, Could also outscore Dak potentially if Daniel Jones is having to, throw to Waller. Maybe throws a couple touchdown passes to Waller. Anything goes with that type of build. But even if Waller's in, I think I lean Barkley more, just because we don't know how hurt Waller is. But by all accounts, in the preseason, Waller was having a good relationship, good chemistry with Daniel Jones. Like, they were hitting each other a lot, and Daniel Jones was hitting Waller a lot with his passes and targeting him pretty frequently. So Waller's going to be a big part of this passing game. So definitely something to consider, but I'm leaning Barkley over Waller in that situation. Now, you could also substitute CeeDee Lamb for Pollard in these builds too, but I think the story there would be, CeeDee Lamb is getting stopped short of scoring touchdowns, but he's getting a lot of receptions and he's getting a lot of yardage because we want to fade Dak. We don't want Dak to do well. So if one of his receivers is doing well, we need to tell a story that he's not quite getting those touchdowns, but he's putting up a lot of PPR points. And you probably in that situation would want to have the kicker of Dallas in there. It's a more difficult story to tell, a game script to write. So that's why we have right now Pollard in there instead of CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb makes more sense to fade in this type of build. So that's the direction that I'm going in now. We're doing pretty well in our earlier build. We took a look at the Bengals versus the Browns, and we had Nick Chubb in the captain spot. Nick Chubb is currently doing really well in there. We had him with Deshaun Watson, who was also doing well. So we're doing pretty good in that game. Looks like they just scored again. Take a look at that show from earlier. Subscribe to the channel, by the way, and hit like on these videos. We're doing a lot of these breakdowns. We've been pretty good about it so far. We hit a lot of our points on the Thursday night showdown game, and it looks like the Browns are performing for us. Deshaun Watson has 21 points. Nick Chubb has 19 currently. Other guys we were looking at, Elijah Moore, doing pretty good. Peoples-Jones, not doing good for us. Like he's the only really negative there. Browns D has 9 points as well. So we got some decent stuff going on in that game, but you can check out the show earlier so you can see what we called and how it played out and get an idea of how we're kind of doing these shows and the game scripts that we're trying to present here. So we'll be back. Keep an eye on the channel. I'll put up a short 1-minute video in our YouTube shorts that will focus on captain picks, alternative captain picks for this game. And we'll be back tomorrow with another look at the Monday night showdown. So keep an eye on the channel. Subscribe at Heatseeker Sports on Twitter. Subscribe at Pumacom over on Twitter too. And make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page and give us a like. Help us keep putting these shows up. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.